Hello again. Now, organized crime is on the rise countrywide, and criminals have become more brazen than ever before. South Africa's serious crime problem is getting worse. Today, we're going to be looking at where South Africa fits when it comes to transnational organized crime levels. What are the major crimes, and how are law enforcement agencies handling this? Are they managing? We've set up a panel discussion this afternoon to look into it. We're joined by Interpol Ambassador Andy Mashaile. Together, he's here in the studio with us, together with Chad Thomas from IRS Forensic Investigations. And via Zoom, we have Dalene Deale, Head of Secure Citizen. Gentlemen and lady, good afternoon. Welcome. You know, I was looking at the headlines. I Googled one of the things I did as we're preparing. I just said, organized crime in South Africa. And you look at the headlines. It's very, very scary. Assessing South Africa's organized crime risk, link between crime and politics in South Africa, how organized crime is blighting South Africa's economy. So it's also affecting our economy, billions lost to organized fisheries crime in our oceans. So it's everywhere. I mean, how serious has it become, Ambassador Mashaile?
It is very, very serious. Those who are involved set up structures, criminal structures set up as in corporate structures. Very brutal when the objectives and targets are not set, and driving their runners to ensure that they take from us as an economy and us as a people. Very, very serious. And this forces the people of this country to take a step back and really focus on what organized crime is. We might participate in organized crime by buying these fake goods that finance terrorism, that finance human trafficking, that finance organ harvesting, and many of those.
So we might be aiding them without knowing that we're doing so by buying. Chad, in your research, in your investigations, what are the sort of crimes that could fall under organized crimes definition?
I think organized crime touches most crime in South Africa. When one looks at the fact that our country is being grey listed, a large reason for that is because of organized crime. But then we look at the three cases that have captured the public's imagination at the moment: the AKA assassination, the assassination of Cluta Murray and his son Thomas, and of course the brazen escape of Thabo Bester. Each one of those three crimes has a component of organized crime linked to it, whether it's the hiring of contract killers, whether it's the hiring of safe houses, whether it's the illicit flows of funds to be able to pay these contract killers and how to disguise that funding. It appears to be that organized crime touches almost all major crimes in South Africa.
Yeah, Dalene, let's bring you in here as we start this discussion. I mean, the serious levels of organized crime in South Africa are well documented, and we have incidents all the time. Like we saw earlier this week, yeah. I think a local chief in Mpumalanga, Mr. Mnisi, was gunned down by armed men. He was allegedly involved in rhino poaching, and he was facing charges along those, together with former police officers and some of them current. I mean, are our law enforcement agencies coping, in their fight against organized crime?
Do you know, the sad reality is that we have a combination of people who really are passionate about doing what's right in our country, and then you have some bad apples, but the bad apples overshadow everything good that happens. And when we recently were on the eNCA, and we were talking about what SAPS can do to improve it, and there seems that there's this overshadowing negativity, and the guys that are trying to do good are not necessarily shining. But I also think that we need to start equipping them with technology. And I mean, I'm one of those people who fly the banner of how do we prove that you are who that you say you are. We see, I mean, we had another article that was reported again on News 24 today, where you have so many people impersonating and money laundering and pretending to be somebody else and fronting companies. And how do we put basic processes in place and we start doing what's right so that we can get the bad apples out? How do we equip the police? Because I don't think that throwing humans at it is enough.
Yeah, do we have an understanding, Ambassador Mashaile, how these organized criminal networks actually operate?
We do have an understanding. At National Head Office, while General Stoller was still the National Commissioner, I had the opportunity of working with him and other team members on modus operandi analysis specialization. they would study how law enforcement officers would track them down. After doing that, gathering that information, they would then reverse engineer the process so that they're always 10 or 100 steps ahead of us, including the issue of resources. They are highly resourced, and they make sure that all those who might be difficult are bought off and paid off.
Is part of that resourcing, Chad, in your view, from what you're seeing in investigation, a lack of capable intelligence gathering?
It's not just intelligence. Intelligence at a stage was captured and used for politically motivated matters, but now we're seeing that the incapacitation stretches across the board. In the last 5 years, we've lost about 1,000 seasoned detectives. There was no effective skill transfer. When one looks at the Hawks, General Lebeya has been quite open about the fact that he only has 49% capacitation. That means that less than half the posts are filled. That means that investigators are sitting with double the amount of dockets. So one has to take into consideration that without sufficient infrastructure and capacity, organized crimes will start getting the better of the system.
So the next question I want to ask, Dalene, is organized crime now an existential threat to South Africa?
I think it actually always has been, but I think it's becoming more of a problem. So the question is, how do we then address that threat? How do we assist so that we also make sure that the skills transfer that Chad is talking about, that we are ahead of the curve and not trying to catch up? How do we make sure that we start working together, that we collaborate? And I think that it's going to be something that's going to require government, public and private sector collaboration, because this is not a one-man show. This is something where the citizens of South Africa also need to realize that we're not sitting ducks. We can't all just wait to be victims or have our country taken away from us. It's time for us to actually get up and stand and say, this is not okay. When the rest of the world looks at us, they see us as a country that's become, open doors when it comes to identity theft, when it comes to money laundering. We've become the third highest country from a money laundering perspective. And that's because we've become easy targets. And it's not just corruption. We've got to make sure that we start cleaning up in every aspect of the way when it comes to crime. And it starts with getting the basics right. So we need to start working together and figuring out what that is, and stop just looking internally, but start looking at collaborative efforts.
Yeah, Ambassador Mashaile, listening to Dalene, I'm thinking as an ordinary citizen, it might be difficult sometimes to connect the dots, because sometimes you've got these incidents that are happening different times, but they're all part of this. None of them sometimes might be as isolated as we think. How can citizens be assisted to recognize organized crime?
Braden, when you see this gentleman from Pakistan or from India or from some other country, these gentlemen being brought to a spaza shop, but the rate at which they are being rotated, you look at them and you go to them and you talk to them, and some of the people that tell you that we are from Swaziland and we were forced to be here. So your human trafficking element, as well as your element of kidnapping, as well as your element of being smuggled in, then suggest to you and I that when we engage in discussions, we realize that crime might be happening before our own eyes.
Right under our noses.
Yes.
Yeah. What about political, we used to talk about political killings, but we're seeing a number of assassinations now, killings that are being reported. The numbers are horrendous. You look at how much assassinations are said to be contributing to our murder rates. Chad, where does that all fit in, the assassinations?
So murder for hire is not something new in South Africa. We saw political killings in KwaZulu-Natal over the years. We've seen an increase in taxi boss murders. But of course, now we're seeing an overlap of these murders that were somehow in isolation, rural areas in KZN.
We've also seen assassinations of whistleblowers.
We've seen, and that's exactly what's happening now. Now we're seeing hits taking place on highways. We're seeing hits taking place in suburbia. Suddenly it's caught everybody's attention. And yes, where there's a system of no accountability or little to no consequences, you're going to see the far more brazenness of organized criminals coming to the fore.
Yeah, I mean, the assassinations would be worrying at every rate. I mean, one of the well-known transnational organized crime acts is the one around rhino poaching, and it was in the news, as I said earlier this week, in the case of Clyde Mnisi in Mpumalanga. How rife is that, Dalene? I mean, South Africa has got this. We are blessed with, endowed with this rich wildlife. That's still a target.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting at an airport now, but if you speak to me while I'm in an office, I always have rhinos everywhere. I carry a rhino on my chain, because these are majestic animals, and we need to start protecting what can't protect themselves, and that's animals and that's human beings. But we also need to start taking a look at how do we start cleaning up? How do we make examples and start getting to a point where we say, you know what, we're not going to tolerate this? And it's true what Chad says, whistleblowers are also being taken out at the moment. How do we start getting to a point where, as South Africans, we stand up and we say, regardless of what's happening, we're not going to settle for mediocrity, and we're going to stand up and we're going to start fighting? Whether it means that we need to start saying that, whistleblowers need to be protected more, and we need to start saying, okay, if we have a way of getting involved with combating anything as simple as people coming in and they're starting to get hired to poach, and they get hired to take out individuals. It doesn't matter whether it's an animal or a human being. If it is illegal, it's illegal. What are we doing from a consequence perspective when it comes to law? How are people being put in jail or being taken to task for what they're doing wrong? We are looking at our system, and people are getting away with the most horrendous things, which means that the petty crime thinks, well, if those guys can get away with horrendous things, then, petty crime is nothing. And we're currently entering a world of lawlessness in South Africa that we need to take hold of, and we need to do it as a society as a whole.
Yeah, I saw a headline recently saying South Africa must tackle organized crime before it's too late. So the question is, have we gone too far? I mean, is the battle lost? Ambassador Mashaile.
The battle is about to be lost when we don't have things like the online police set up by Interpol with their Google virtuals called metaverse police. Online, criminals have use cell phones. Criminals use computers, and we are able to get technology that will isolate all of these interesting things on the deep web and dark web, which is where, Braden, as I'm talking to you, you can hire a hitman now on deep web and dark web, and he will go and do the job, and you pay him through a Bitcoin that gets lost into the system. When you have police resources that sit and look specifically, scour those pages of the deep web and dark web, which is where Dalene comes in. You will be able to tackle the guys in Sentin in the big halls, those who are scammers, those who steal millions. If per annum we lose 2.2 billion to scammers, then it means the level of organized crime needs to be looked at, because the economy is getting punched badly.
Yeah, intelligence also, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, Chad, but I mean, how critical is it? Where does it come in? Because we keep on being told that our crime intelligence, if it was better, you've mentioned goggles, you've mentioned the dark webs, you've mentioned that's the cybersecurity stuff. You'd expect intelligence to be active there. What should they be focusing on, Chad?
So we can't lay the blame squarely at the feet of crime intelligence. When one looks at how the budget is made up and how budget is allocated, the police budget sits at around 100 billion rand per annum. Only 2% of that, that's 2 billion rand, goes towards the Hawks, who are the priority crime investigators. Conversely, about 3.5% of that budget goes towards VIP protection and goes towards security. So one has to ask the question, where are our priorities? When the investigating directorate was established, everybody thought it would be the new Scorpions.
That's the NPA.
That's correct. Their budget was a mere 100 million. It's now been increased in year 3 or 4 to, I think, about 350 million. But that is a unit that you could see an effective return on investment if they were capacitated. So
besides the intelligence capability, from what I'm hearing, there's a question of resources in terms of budget and stuff, but it remains a critical element, Dalene. Am I wrong to say we have to get it right as well? It's not the silver bullet, but it's one of the key ingredients in fighting organized crime.
So I don't think that there are any silver bullets. So, and I mean, in our world, when it comes to cyber security, as you've heard, you know, we've made technology as cheap as chips. And we've done it because we want every single company, no matter how big or small, to be able to afford verifying the identity of an individual that you're doing business with. We're hearing some scary statistics. Southern African Fraud Prevention Services owns 50% of our company. And to give you some of those statistics, we've had money muling go up by 62% in the last year. But fraud overall has gone up by 40%. We've had forged documents go up by 66%. Impersonation fraud has gone up by 356%. SAFPS has helped corporate businesses save 5 billion rand in the last year and 17 billion in the last 5 years. And that's through technology. But how do we make technology available to companies so that they can also participate in fighting?
Sorry, Dalene, I have to cut you short there. Thank you very much for talking to us from an airport. You are on your way. Thank you very much, Dalene and Andy, as well as Chad. We're just looking at that issue of organized crime.